And we're live.
Welcome everyone to our International Women's Day 2022 event. We're excited to get the program underway. I'm Juanita, a mother, a book addict, part-time library worker, activist, and Communist Party member, where I am on the provincial executive, gender equity, and trade union commissions. Today on International Women's Day, we find ourselves in a world that is racked by war, a 2-year pandemic, growing climate disasters, and the growing number of bodies uncovered at residential schools across this country. Our conditions today reflect the rampant agenda of capitalism, colonization, and imperialism. Women face the brunt of these deteriorating global conditions, and yet it is Indigenous women that have continued the struggle to defend their lands, waters, and livelihoods against threats to their sovereignty. It is women around the globe that have continued their fight for reproductive justice and against war, imperialism, and violence. With a focus on the deepening crisis of capitalism, patriarchy, colonialism, and imperialism, today we will explore ways we can rebuild a strong, united women's movement in the struggle for social justice, peace, and liberation. And Farah is going to co-host with me. If she could introduce herself.
Thank you, Juanita. Hi, everyone. Happy International Women's Day. I'm Farah Malik. I'm a member of the Communist Party of Canada, and I'm a rights activist. And by profession, I'm an accountant. I try to join my voice and my hands with the rights movements, women's rights, environment, Indigenous peoples, and wherever I feel that impact needs to be made against capitalism, against imperialism. Thank you. And Juanita and I will be with you today. Thanks.
Thanks. Our apologies for not having ASL interpretation today. We tried very hard. We have simultaneous interpretation available in French. You first need to be watching on Zoom. To access the interpretation channel, click on the globe at the bottom of the screen where the French option will appear. The videos will not be interpreted. They will be subtitled in French and will be shared after the event. We are proud to introduce Laureen Blue Waters, who will open our session. Blue is Nikamoon, Earth Song, Wolf Clan, Cree, Métis, Mi'kmaq. Blue is a member of the Métis Nation of Ontario. Blue's family is from Big River, Saskatchewan, Star Blanket Reserve, and Brador Lake, Eskasoni First Nation, Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. Blue grew up with her grandmother and learned about traditional medicines, performing extractions, healing, and care of the sick. Her grandmother also shared her knowledge of the great teachings. At 10 years old, Blue was adopted by a white family in Parkdale. Blue spent many years in High Park hunting geese, rabbits, ducks, muskrats, harvesting medicinal plants, and maintaining her connection to Mother Earth. Blue's gifts include traditional teachings, giving traditional spirit names, hand drumming, songwriting, creative writings, and full moon conductor, pipe ceremonies, and sweat lodge ceremonies. She is a two-spirit person, a mother of 3, a grandmother of 3, a sun dancer, a pipe carrier. Welcome, Blue.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who's joining today. I will start off with my name and who I am in my language, and then I will offer a blessing and a prayer for today's event. Tansay Iski Nikamoon, Natisi Nakasun, Mayengindo de Matathakup, Saskatchewan, Eskazoni, Red River, Nadunjaba, Ayakwe. So what I've shared with you is my name is Earth Song, and that's the sound and the responsibility for everything within the earth. And so with that, I walk with the wolf clan. And I am a Yahweh, which is the Cree word for neither man or woman. My pronouns are they and them. And I'm happy to be here with you today. Today, as you meet, I ask those ancestors gone on before us and those ancestors yet to come, those little ones waiting to be coming in a human form to us. And so they watch us today as we move forward to do this work, to see if this place is a good space for them to come into at this time. And with all the injustices that are out there in the world, it's more needed now than ever to make sure that we stand up for all voices, that we bring all people together. And we ask the Creator to help us do that, and to help us do that with those teachings that we were given about kindness and compassion and care, of truth, honesty, humility, wisdom, love, bravery, and respect. It's a big responsibility to be a human being today, to bring forth these understandings that all lives are important. We all come as a spirit with our human body, and that we must connect together to create that beautiful way of being with each other, regardless of our differences, regardless of where we're from, what we believe in, who we pray to, but to come together to help dismantle all those underlying things in place that cause us to not live our lives in a good way. All those understandings that people have where women don't matter, those life givers, the one that bring forth the new generations, experience violence at a much higher rate, the discrimination, the oppression, the hierarchy systems which are in place, those have to be dismantled. People know how to lead other people, and the sooner we get back to us leading ourselves, the better off that we will be and all around us will be. So with this, I ask those ancestors to help us do this work today, to help bring about change, to bring about challenges to what exists, to bring our understandings forward and to be heard and to be understood and to be able to cause change to happen. So for this, I say hi, miigwech. Thank you for inviting me here today. And I know you're going to have a beautiful day in here. All kinds of information to help you do this work, to recognize each other for who we are, to respect each other for who we are, and to educate our own selves to make sure we're sure of what we know and to move forward in a good way. So for that, I say hi, miigwech, Laureen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Blue. It's an honor to have you with us today. Thank you very much for your time. Our next presentation is a video from Todas, Venezuela, with their important message for International Women's Day. Laura Franco is a lawyer, a feminist, and women's rights activist, and a member of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela. She has been the General Directorate of the National Institute for Women, General Directorate of Political and Social Affairs of the Ministry of the Interior and Justice. Currently, she combines feminist militancy with a responsibility in the Venezuelan Foreign Ministry as Director of Exchange and Cooperation in the Simón Bolívar Institute for Peace and Solidarity Among Peoples. There's an important note that I want to share with you is that to our French listeners, that while these videos will not be simultaneously translated, videos with French subtitles will be made available on our YouTube channel after the event. In the meantime, if you have any trouble hearing the videos, please switch to the English channel and then switch back after the video to resume the French translated version. Todas, Venezuela.
Saludos, queridísimas hermanas, reciban desde Venezuela un abrazo sororo, amoroso, decirles que la revolución bolivariana tiene rostro de mujer y eso se expresa en cada uno de los espacios territoriales y sectoriales donde las mujeres copamos todos los espacios y estamos en plena batalla, en plena lucha, no solamente por defendernos de los ataques crueles del bloqueo y las sanciones que aplica el gobierno de los Estados Unidos con gobiernos cómplices como el de Canadá, sino nos encontramos en la construcción de nuestra ruta, de nuestro sendero, de nuestro horizonte socialista y feminista al que no estamos dispuestas a abandonar. Les agradecemos profundamente todas las demostraciones de solidaridad del Partido Comunista de Canadá con nosotras, con el pueblo venezolano, con las luchas justas del pueblo venezolano en defensa de su autodeterminación y soberanía. Y además agradecemos también nos hayan invitado a este espacio donde se conmemora el Día Internacional de la Mujer Trabajadora, en el marzo feminista donde todas estamos movilizadas, siguiendo, peleando y luchando por nuestros espacios. Desde Venezuela también profundizamos nuestro internacionalismo y les decimos que desde acá nos hacemos solidarias con las luchas de las mujeres pobres, las mujeres trabajadoras, las mujeres migrantes, las mujeres indígenas, que en Canadá también resisten el propio imperialismo que sus dirigentes apoyan y encarnan. Sabemos que esas contradicciones se han acelerado hoy en estos tiempos pandémicos y por eso les enviamos también desde la República Bolivariana de Venezuela nuestro abrazo solidario, nuestro abrazo sororo. Decirles que queremos vernos siempre como hermanas de lucha, como mujeres trabajadoras que no tenemos fronteras y que nos enfrentamos todas a un mismo enemigo que es el capitalismo y es el imperialismo y es el patriarcado que se reproduce libremente en este marco de este sistema de opresión. Un abrazo, queridas hermanas, sigan en resistencia y lucha que nosotras venceremos.
Thank you so much. So please welcome our next presenter, Ana Ragamas, who will be reading the greeting we received from Gretel Marante Rosset, who is the Foreign Affairs Director of the Federation of Cuban Women in Havana.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I want to be very transparent. I am a little bit torn with opposing feelings as I sit here today in front of you to read this statement. On the one hand, it is an absolute honor to be given the privilege to read a statement from Gretel Marante Rosset from the Cuban Women's Federation, our sister in struggle. On the other hand, recognizing that they cannot be the ones sharing this statement live due to the obstacles posed by the criminal, illegal blockade that affects the lives of thousands of women in Cuba. And this has been going on for over 60 years, causes rage. As a communist, in the spirit of internationalism, as a feminist, I stand in solidarity with the heroic, resilient, and revolutionary peoples of Cuba. The statement reads as follows. Dear friends, receive warm greetings from the Cuban Women Federation. My name is Gretel Rosset, and I am a member of the Foreign Affairs Department. We want to express our message of solidarity. The Cuban Women Federation is a national social organization that was created on August 23rd, 1960, thanks to the support and the dedication of Vilma Espín and Fidel Castro. The responsibility for this task was assigned to Vilma Espín Guillois, who since its creation led the organization. Since the very beginning of the revolution, our eternal commander-in-chief, Fidel Castro, said, women in Cuba are a revolution within another revolution. Since its establishment on August 23rd, 1960, the Cuban Women's Federation has as its primary objective the tasks of prevention work, working with women and families, and our work is based on two important pillars, that of social and educational work. An effective and essential part of our objective in the work of prevention and social care from the CWF include the Casas de Enfoque Mujer y Familia y Casas de Consejería, houses or meeting places that focus on the needs of women and families and counseling, a meeting place to work, think, learn, share, enjoy, train, receive guidance and support from professionals and specialists. It has three main lines of focus: individual counseling, group counseling, and job and skill training, where courses, seminars, workshops are held to strengthen people from and for the community. The Cuban Women Federation is a clear expression of unity of all the Cuban women. With more than 4 million affiliated, it represents more than 91% of the women's population over the age of 14. It is the only condition to be a member, and it is completely voluntary. We can proudly say that today, women in Cuba enjoy the full exercise of human rights. Our social projects guarantee the access to education, culture, health, and specialized attention to people in a universal way, free of charge, without exclusion, be it by sex, skin color, or religion. Cuba was the first country to sign and the second to ratify the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the CEDAW. In terms of labor rights, it is worth emphasizing that we Cubans receive equal pay for equal jobs. Based on our experience, to achieve the equality of rights and opportunities between men and women, it is necessary to develop a real culture of equality. That is the creation of the appropriate material infrastructure, social development, and the participation of women. The application of a gender-focused perspective in Cuba reflects the political will of the government, which has fostered the strengthening of mechanisms and regulations integrated in a system that recognizes the common and the specifics of gender perspective regarding the situation of women and men in society. I think that our structure at all levels helps us to identify the problems that each woman faces. This is of particular importance for organized women from a grassroots level. The Cuban Women Federation has been recognized by the government and society as a national mechanism for the advancement of women due to the following. 1, its extensive work at the grassroots level. 2, its role in the introduction of gender concepts in the institutional agenda and public policies. And its work for the complete integration of women to economic, political, social, and cultural life in the country. The Cuban Women Federation has legislative power. This gives us the opportunity to promote and laws and public policies with a gender perspective. Another important moment in the process of introducing gender-focused perspective in public policies was the adoption of a decree in 1997 of the National Plan of Action of the Republic of Cuba to follow up on the 4th UN World Conference on Women in Beijing in 1995. The Cuban National Plan of Action systematized what had been achieved up to that moment and the projects for the future. Recently, a new program for the advancement of women was approved by the government. The CWF counts with special consultative status with ECOSOC, Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, since 1997. This facilitates our participation in Council's sessions and also in its functional commissions, fundamentally in the Commission of the Status of Women and Human Rights Council. It also enables us to present periodic oral and written contributions regarding the work of our organization. The Cuban Women Federation is also a member of many international movements and organizations, such as the Women's International Democratic Federation, the WIDF, the Conference of NGOs, the CONGO, the International Council of Social Welfare, and the World Women's March, among others. The Cuban Women Federation coordinates the regional office of the International Democratic Women Federation to organize the work of women organizations in Latin America and the Caribbean. The work of the Cuban Women's Federation and advancement of Cuban women has continued consolidating in spite of the effects of the unjust politics of economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed by the government of the United States to Cuba, which has a particular impact on the lives of women and their families. Cuba is ours. It belongs to the Cuban people, and we will continue to be an example of a free and sovereign nation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. Did you know that the Federation of Cuban Women represents women of all ages? Imagine a women's movement where 91% of the women in the country participate. Let's get started. Our next performer really needs no introduction, as she has been involved in the movements for decades. Faith Nolan is a singer-songwriter with a deep history of queer, women's, and anti-poverty activism. Born in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and of African, Mi'kmaq, and Irish descent, her parents and extended family were coal miners in Cape Breton. She later grew up in Toronto's working-class Cabbagetown. She brings all of these experiences to her social justice work through music. As a founder of 7 different Ontario choirs and through her love of music, Faith works towards a better understanding of how poverty has created a disproportionate representation of Black and First Nations women in poverty and in our Canadian prison system. Welcome, Faith.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting to be on until 1:30, but that's good. It looks like a great panel so far. Really enjoyed this last sister that was speaking from Cuba. And Helen and all you guys, thanks a lot for all the work you're doing. This is a song, I just added some, well, I did change the lyrics a bit, and I added a melody. It's called First They Came. I think today when we're looking at all of the, all of the sort of the what they call disaster capitalism, like the pandemic, all these laws that are coming in, the pipeline sort of pushing through, and now they're trying to like grab up some land in Russia and make a war, make some money. All these things are kind of going through just as we're coming out of this disaster capitalist kind of pandemic where, we're fearing for our lives. And so anyways, this little song called First They Came, they keep coming for different peoples. Obviously the big shout out, of course, to the work that's being done to find all the graves of so many people, that babies that established this colony, the death of so many, so needlessly. So this is called First They Came. I'll send this out to all the sisters all over the world who were, I guess, engaged in the biggest struggle in the world for equality, 51% women. Okay. First they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up. I didn't ask them why. I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't even try. Then they came for the Muslims, and I didn't speak up. I didn't ask them why, 'cause I was not a Muslim. I didn't even try. Now they come for the land and the indigenous, and I still can't speak up. I'm not indigenous living on the land, so I didn't even try. Now they come for the blacks, and I can't speak up. I am not a black, so I didn't even try. And now they come for the oil in the Congo. They come for the oil on the land. They come for the oil in Russia. They come for the oil in Sudan. And I am not a Russian or a Congolese or Sudanese. I don't speak up. I didn't even try. And they come for the queers, the two-spirited, the lesbian, bi, gays, trans, and I am not these things. I cannot speak up. I cannot even try. And they come for the women, the violence, and make you poor 'cause you are a female. And I cannot speak up. I cannot even try. And now I see they're coming for me, and I guess I should have tried. I see they're coming for me, and nobody's asking why. So I better speak up. I better ask them why. And by the time when they come for us, we will be billions of people side by side. It's time to speak up. It's time to ask them why. You know, it's been time. It's a long time. And it seems more and more we have to speak up. I think I'm supposed to do 10 minutes, so I'm going to do another song. Is that okay? Somebody could give me like the thumbs up or what? I can't see anyone, so it's okay. I'll just go ahead and do another song. This is a song that I wrote, which is, I wrote it for my aunt. She was murdered in a long time ago by a man because he wanted a relationship with her, and she said no. Today, you know, we know that, I don't know, I keep hearing them calling it intimate partner violence, but we know that the shelters are still full of women, and the violence that women face in the workplace, on the streets, in their homes, has not decreased any over the years. And, you know, it's all about the bucks, right? As long as you keep somebody down, you steal that money. So this is a song I'm going to dedicate to all of the women who still today are exposed to and living through so much violence. And yeah, it's for my Aunt Nora. Well, I went down to see my auntie. She lived down the lane. I saw the police tape all around her, and I hear that she was dead. Oh, let her go, bless her, wherever she might be, 'cause another woman done gone. Gotta stop the violence, don't you see? Well, the police said, you don't look like her. Your color and your clothes is all wrong. So they wouldn't let me see my auntie as she lied on the table so still and gone. Oh, let her go, bless her. Oh, can't you let that woman be? We need our freedom and justice, 'cause we need equality. Listen, my sisters, 'cause if you do, you can hear there are voices calling out loud and clear. I just sort of changed songs. And they're crying across the ocean, and they're crying across all the lands, and they will cry till we all can understand. None of us are free. None of us are free. One of us is chained. None of us are free. Well, we got to get a message. We gotta get it loud, loud and clear. None of us are free. One of us is chained. None of us are free. And there are many people living in the darkness, and they cannot see the light. And if you don't say that it's wrong, you're saying it's right. None of us are free. None of us are free. One of us is chained. None of us are free. And there are people holding guns and bombs, and people whose lives may not be long, as the oil from the blood drips across the land. None of us are free. None of us are free. One of us is chained. None of us are free. And there are women on the shelters, and they are crying in every land. None of us are free. One of us is chained. None of us are free. Okay, well, thank you very much. I should be back with you in a little bit. Happy IWD, everyone.
Thank you so much, Faye. That was wonderful. Welcome now to one of our great solidarity partners, the Latin American and Caribbean Solidarity Network, and Magdalena Diaz.
Imagine a world in which people of all genders are treated equally, in which they have access to gender-affirming and reproductive choice-based healthcare, in which with eliminated patriarchy and the existence of all hierarchy, and where we instead exist in a radical, no longer heteronormative community, in which everyone and everything is inherently feminist. Imagine a better world for female-identified people. My name is Magdalena Diaz. I bring greetings to the International Women's Day event on behalf of the membership of the Latin American and Caribbean Solidarity Network, also known as LACSON. LACSON is a network that brings together grassroots organizations with roots in Abya Yala to advocate and stand in solidarity with social political justice in the South. We firmly believe a better world is possible. Together, we will win.
Thanks, Magdalena. On our agenda now, we will now share a traditional Tajik Pamiri dance.
گل
Wonderful. We've got now on our agenda, we have, sorry. We have greetings from the Committee of Progressive Pakistani Canadians who do amazing work in the community, including engaging Pakistani Canadians in the promotion of progressive and secular values. Please welcome Farah to read the statement.
Thank you, Vanita. I'm reading this statement not only as a co-host of today's event, but also as a member of Committee of Progressive Pakistani Canadians. The Committee of Progressive Pakistani Canadians would like to congratulate the International Women's Day Committee on holding this event and raising the voice of working class women and non-binary people who are facing unprecedented challenges in Canada today. One of the key challenges impacting racialized immigrant women in Canada today is the rise and visibility of far-right anti-immigrant groups in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, an example of which we have recently seen in the form of so-called Freedom Convoy. Incidents of racism and discrimination against immigrants and Muslim community members are on the rise, besides many individual level incidents of this nature. Earlier in June 2021 in London, Ontario, for example, we saw an entire Muslim family of Pakistani origin was killed by a young attacker who was under the sway of such ideologies. We must not forget that today's racism, bigotry, and violence against ethnic minorities is not comparable of the mass murder, violence, and dispossession inflicted upon Indigenous peoples, who continue to face the consequences of past and present colonization to this date. Yet both are interconnected, both are rooted in racism and white supremacy. Racism and discrimination are used by the ruling elites to divide and to rule, to distract attention from the problems such as high rates of inflation, lack of stable jobs, inordinately expensive housing, crumbling social services. They have created scapegoats such as immigrants. In this backdrop, it is heartening to see the International Women's Day Committee to come forward with a clear platform that raises issues which are on the minds of progressive working class people. We will continue to support efforts which call for land back to Indigenous people, equal rights for everyone, irrespective of race or gender, universal health and childcare, and free higher education. Congratulations, International Women's Day Committee, for articulating our concerns and giving voice to them.
Thank you, Farah, and to the CPPC. Please help us give a warm welcome to Kieran Fatima from the Canadian Peace Congress. Kieran is a tech worker, writer, artist, and podcaster based in Toronto, originally born and raised in Pakistan. She is Vice President of the Canadian Peace Congress and coordinator of the Toronto Association for Peace and Solidarity. She has worked on several events and campaigns to promote gender equity, peace, secularism, and socialism in Canada and around the world.
Hi. Okay, just want to make sure my audio is good. Okay, good. Thank you to the International Women's Day Committee for asking me to speak. It is an honor of mine to speak at this event that I've also been part of the planning, and I know how much hard work the women in this committee have put in to put this together. So especially considering everything else going on in the world. So I want to say a real heartfelt thank you to every single person who has worked on this committee. International Women's Day, or IWD as we like to call it, is celebrated on March 8th in many countries around the world. The United Nations website says that it is a day when women are recognized for their achievements, quote, without regard to divisions, whether national, ethnic, linguistic, cultural, economic, or political, end quote. As I sat down to write down my talking points for today, I felt conflicted because While I have been a feminist and a fervent advocate for justice for women and women's liberation and equality my entire life, I cannot ignore the fact that women as a category is not something I can really reduce to any one characteristic. My own experiences as a brown woman who was born and raised in a poor working class family in a global South country that has been systematically gutted by colonialism and imperialism for decades, and who is queer and in a relationship with another woman for almost 20 years now, and who has survived gender-based violence, homelessness, displacement, deportation, and poverty. All these things mean that I do not have the luxury to simply ignore those so-called divisions of national, ethnic, linguistic, cultural, economic, or political differences. When those in power say that we are being divisive when we talk about things like class, race, gender, etc., they seem to ignore that they are the ones who create and sustain those divisions. Asking people who suffer at the intersections of these so-called divisions to remain quiet and not speak our truths to power erases the majority of the world's population in favor of the small ruling class that benefits from all of us remaining silent and continuing to work to enrich them with our labor and our lives. Often it feels like IWD is a quaint holiday from a simpler time, as today things seem very complicated. And perhaps it is a sign of the fact that women have come a long way since the beginning of this movement that started the IWD. That is why the fissures among women have become more and more apparent. Now, sorry to say, women are also at the forefront of capitalism and imperialism. As an anti-imperialist peace activist, I have to wonder if maybe we should be considering the impact that women can have on other women and on people around the world. Bombs made by the United States, Canada, the UK, and the EU that have been hitting Yemen since 2014 are hitting women and their families there. Sanctions that are currently ensuring that people in Iran, Venezuela, Somalia, Afghanistan, Haiti, Cuba, and many places don't have reliable access to food, water, and medicines are also hurting women and their loved ones that live there. The $3.5 billion that the United States government stole from Afghanistan after NATO occupied that country for the last 20 years is owed to the women of Afghanistan. The $2 billion of gold that the United Kingdom government refuses to return to the government of Venezuela was meant to feed women and children in that country, where over 40,000 people have died due to Western sanctions. And every single day in Gaza and the West Bank, Palestinian women and children face a constant barrage of violence from the United States and Canadian-funded and armed settler colony of Israel, including shootings, beatings, violent and random arrests, even of children, cutting off of food and electricity for the millions living in the open-air prison called Gaza, and how Israel even forces Palestinian families to demolish their own homes so that Israeli settlers can take over more and more Palestinian land. The perpetrators of all this capitalist and imperialist violence against women and children of the world are not just men. Here is a list of some of the women whose achievements we should feel free not to celebrate. I'm going to name some women here. You're free to look them up. Kathy J. Warden, who is the CEO of Northrop Grumman, which is one of the biggest weapons manufacturers in the world. Phoebe Novakovic, former intelligence officer and CEO of General Dynamics, another weapons manufacturer. Leanne Carrott, executive vice president of Boeing and president of Boeing Defense, Space and Security. Ellen Lord, undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment in the US. In other words, the country's top weapons buyer. Gina Haspel, former director of the CIA. Marilyn Hewson, former CEO of Lockheed Martin. Lynn Dougal, vice president of Raytheon and president of Raytheon Intelligence and Information System. Hillary Clinton, former secretary of state who championed the Iraq War
and the NATO bombing of Libya, and gleefully celebrated on national TV the brutal mob killing of Libyan leader Gaddafi. Madeleine Albright, Secretary of State under Bill Clinton, who famously said on national TV's 60 Minutes show that the deaths of 500,000 Iraqi children at the hands of US sanctions was, quote, a price that was worth it, end quote. Victoria Nuland, NATO NED worker or staff member, who helped craft the coup d'etat in Ukraine in 2014, the results of which we are now seeing. Samantha Power, who helped destroy Libya and is currently the head of USAID, USAID. Condoleezza Rice, Secretary of State under George W. Bush, who helped push for the Iraq War and oversaw the treatment of prisoners who were, among other things, waterboarded. And of course, our very own Chrystia Freeland, who continues to praise and uphold her grandfather, Michael Chomiak, who volunteered to serve in the German invasion of Poland and was, even according to the Ottawa Citizen newspaper, an actual Nazi collaborator. Freeland was just seen in a Toronto rally last week, surrounded by banners resembling neo-Nazi groups, including Right Sector. And there are many, many more examples I'm sure you can think of. However, we must remember that IWD is a day for all women, not just the women who have made their way up the ladder in the patriarchal, bloodthirsty, exploitative industries of war and capitalism. In fact, there are far more of us than there are of them. Women today play crucial roles in liberatory movements throughout the world, including the Palestinian liberation movement, the anti-war movements, trade union movements throughout the world, the fight against gender-based violence and oppression, and the fight for reproductive justice, among other things. Historically, also, women were always at the forefront of every revolutionary movement, whether it was in the USSR, Cuba, China, or anywhere else. There are many revolutionary women who we can celebrate, like Celia Sanchez, one of the founders of the 26th of July movement in Cuba. Haiti Santa Maria, who participated in the assault on the Moncada barracks in Santiago de Cuba, an action for which she was imprisoned. And she was a founding member of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Cuba. Melba Hernandez, also an active member of the Cuban Revolution and one of the best known women who fought alongside Fidel Castro in the Cuban Revolutionary War against Fulgencio Batista. The Mariana Grajales Women's Platoon, which was founded in September 1958 as Fidel Castro's personal bodyguard unit. Tete Puebla, who served second in command of the platoon and was named director for the care of war victims after the Cuban Revolution. Alexandra Kolontoy, Ukrainian Bolshevik and Russian revolutionary fighter, Lyudmila Pavlichenko, Soviet sniper in the Red Army during World War II, who was credited with 309 confirmed Nazi deaths. Maria Oktyabrska, Nadeya Krupskaya, Zoya Kozmodemyanskaya, sorry if I'm messing up some names, Zenaida Portnova, and there are many, many, many more revolutionary women today and in the past, many of whose names get erased from history. IWD's origins were in the revolutionary and socialist organizations that fought for women's rights, for equality under the law, and for women's liberation from the exploitations of capitalism, led by women like Clara Zetkin and Rosa Luxemburg. We must not let the liberal bourgeois erasure of oppression by capitalism take over this very important day. We need to refocus IWD on women who are working for peace, for justice, for the liberation of all of humanity from the chains of oppression and exploitation. Treating women like we are all essentially the same is frankly insulting. It erases the fact that each woman has many facets of being. She has a position in class society, in the social structures of race and ethnicity and more. She has agency. She has the ability to choose to be a good person or choose to serve the imperialist, warmongering, patriarchal system that continues to imprison us all. Every year, I see the mainstream platitudes of IWD, and every year it feels empty to me. I want IWD to be something women all over the world actually celebrate, because they know that it is not just a hollow advertising tactic, but a genuine celebration of the very best that women can be if we come together and promise to ourselves to work for the women of the world who do not get glossy, photoshopped pictures plastered on billboards as some form of consumerist feminism. I want International Women's Day to be truly for international women. Thank you.
Thank you to Kieran and to the Canadian Peace Congress for such a timely and powerful message. Like many women, our next guest wears many hats. She is a Mohawk woman, a mother, a storyteller, a filmmaker, a singer, and activist. I've been lucky enough to get to know her over the last year or so, singing at 1492 Landback Lane Unity Jams and talking about her film, Blood and Water, at screenings. I'm very happy to introduce Layla Stotts here to sing for us today.
Dago, Scano, Layla Stotts Yongyats, Anawara Niwa Gita Roden, Ganyak Gehaga Niwa Gotwan Jordan, Oswego ni Dawageno. Hello. Hello, everyone out there. My name is Layla Stotts. I am Mohawk Turtle Clan from the Six Nations of the Grand River. I am a filmmaker, an activist, a land defender, recently standing alongside the Wet'suwet'en people in their fight to protect the Wenzikwa. And that kind of stems one of the reasons I wanted to share one of these songs here with you today, because this song was sang in a moment of violence, in standing against this pipeline that is encroaching on their sacred headwaters. These waters, this river is pristine. I drank from it. And when that water hit my lips, there was an energy, there was an electricity. I could feel it tingling on my tongue going down. And it was just, there was life in it. This water, all of the salmon from all of the neighboring tribes on Wet'suwet'en territory come to this spot to spawn. So the impacts of destroying this very precious ecosystem, you know, is far-reaching. So I stood on this bridge with the Wet'suwet'en tribe, and there was about 100 RCMP that were approaching, coming up in buses, helicopters flying in the air. They had attack dogs on leashes that were barking and snarling, and assault rifles, military greens coming up the side, snipers on you. And, you know, you're in this moment where you have this question, you know, this society tells you you're in trouble. Society tells you you're breaking the law, standing in defense of this river. And there's this moment where you have to decide. And as Haudenosaunee women, as I've been on this reclamation journey of understanding who I am as a Mohawk woman, what my responsibilities are, what my role is, and my teachings that were taken from me as a generational survivor of residential schools. As I've been on this journey, I've understood that it is the role and the responsibility of women to protect the water, to be the voice of the water. We carry the water within us, the most sacred of water, to bring life into this world. We are the ones bringing the next generation. So it's our responsibility to protect it. So as I stood on that bridge, you know, in the face of violence, you know, the police, the RCMP were coming up in formation, and the one at the front had a large stick. I guess they call it a riot stick or something. But it was me and, you know, two men, and the rest of us were women and elders standing on that bridge. And I just remember him waving his arm in the air, and he went, "Ooh," and they all grunted together. "Ooh." And in that moment, I knew that they were not there for peace. They were not there for reconciliation. They were there for oppression. They were there to show dominance and to make me feel fear. In one troubling moment that will never leave me from that, standing on that bridge, defending that water, was when I was arrested. I was arrested, my arms were cuffed behind my back, and I was put in the back of a cruiser. And as I was put in there, the police officer shut the door on me, and I looked up at him, and he smiled at me and he winked. And it put this sickening feeling into my stomach. I remember feeling as a woman, as an Indigenous woman, completely powerless, like he had taken that from me. And this is just scratching the surface of the oppression that Indigenous people have felt protecting their lands, being dispossessed of their lands, being criminalized in the process. Now I'm, going through the process and seeing it from the inside out. But in that moment of when those police officers were coming at us and those dogs were barking, and you want to react in anger. I remember seeing them pull my brother Logan from the group hug that we were in, and seeing 20 police officers on top of him, grabbing him by his braids, his face shoved in the ground. He's yelling at me, "I can't breathe, Layla, I can't breathe." And all I wanted to do was just react in anger and protect him. But something in me said, what would the peacemaker do? One of my elders has been teaching me the story of the peacemaker's journey. I encourage you to look it up and understand it. What would the peacemaker do? So in that moment, I sang this song. So I'll sing it for you. It's called the Mohawk Water Song. It's by Bear Fox. You can check it out on YouTube. Ganega yolo, ganega nolo, yungana lumba onega, yungana lumba onega, ganega yolo, ganega nolo, Onega, yona yonega, ganega yono, ganega nono, Let's sing another one for you. The drum has this healing power, this connecting power. It reminds us of our connected heartbeats and brings us all together. It's been used as a medicine, as a way to, ground ourselves and connect ourselves to that heartbeat that's within all of us. The instrument, I have one more song. Do I have time for one more song? Do I? I have one more song, and this rattle was given to me by actually a complete stranger. She didn't know me at all. I was at a rally in Toronto, and I told her that I was Turtle Clan, and she said, "Oh, I have something for you." And she handed me this rattle. It's got rabbit fur and turtle and the rabbit. So yeah, it's a very special rabbit, or a very special rattle. I met you by the riverside. The quiet riot burning in the night. I caught your eye along the line, along the spine of the big black snake. Tried to steal our mother's blood, tried to bleed her dry. Stole our daughters from the fathers, left our sons to die. Tried to steal our mother's blood, tried to bleed her dry. Stole their daughters from the fathers, left their sons to die. We found on a long far deep within the pine. We found peace and quiet deep within their violence. We found on a long quad deep within the pine. Tell those colonizers love is colorblind. I met you by the riverside, the quiet riot burning in the night. I caught your eye along the line, along the spine of the big black snake. Tried to steal our mother's blood, tried to bleed her dry. Stole our daughters from the fathers, left our sons to die. Tried to steal our mother's blood, tried to bleed her dry. Stole our daughters from the fathers, left our sons to die. We found on a long far deep within the pine. We found peace and quiet deep within their violence. We found on a long far deep within the pine. Tell those colonizers love is colorblind. I met you by the riverside, the quiet riot burning in the night. I caught your eye along the line, along the spine of the big black snake. Nyalagoa. So in Mohawk, I used one of the Mohawk words in there. That last song was actually written by my brother, and by the riverside. Just one night it came to him. And the words in it are gonalonkwa. So that's the one word I want to teach you here today, the Mohawk word, gonalonkwa. And it means I love you. And, you know, as a generational survivor of residential schools, I had a survivor, Geronimo Henry, tell me a story. He went to the school when he was 5 years old, and he left when he was 16. So he spent 11 years in the Mohawk Institute Residential School. And he said, Layla, in those 11 years, never once did I hear the words, I love you. And so for me, when I heard that story, it opened up a lot of traumas within me and understanding why my own mother, my own family, my own parents and grandparents struggled so much to say, I love you. So I make it my personal mission to teach everyone how to say, I love you in Mohawk. And I feel like every time we say it, you know, we're saying it to, you know, those generations of children that never heard it, you know, and as women, you know, we have this special power to spread love, to share love, to show that love. And it is one of our responsibilities to give that to the children. And so many Indigenous children didn't get to experience that. So say it with me, even if you mess it up, just try it. Gonalonkwa, gonalonkwa, gonalonkwa. So gonalonkwa, I love you. Thank you so much, Juanita, and everyone for having me here today. I really appreciate being able to share my voice and my story. And yeah, you want to reach out to me more. We actually have a film screening tonight. We've got a bunch coming up next week. So yeah, I look forward to seeing everybody soon.
Thank you very much, Layla. Thank you for joining us today. So powerful songs and beautiful voice, and Konalonkwa.
Gonalonkwa.
Thank you. Another important solidarity partner is up next, the Palestinian Youth Movement, which is a transnational, independent, grassroots movement of young Palestinians in Palestine and in exile worldwide, as a result of the ongoing Zionist colonization and occupation of their homeland. Palestinian Youth Movement.
On March 8th, the world celebrates International Women's Day, a day that has its roots in revolutionary women's struggle against capitalism, despite continued attempts at co-option by bourgeois feminists in the last few decades. We, the Palestinian Youth Movement, honor the revolutionary history and legacy of International Women's Day and pay homage to revolutionary Palestinian women of the past and the present, who have never wavered in their resistance to colonialism and imperialism. We look to the legacy of Palestinian revolutionary women who have offered us a clear understanding of our material conditions and who have rejected attempts by NGOs, imperialist feminists, and Zionism to sever the struggle of Palestinian women from the anti-colonial struggle. We affirm that there can be no liberation of women without the liberation of our homeland from Zionist colonialism and imperialism. Colonization is a gendered phenomenon, and in the case of the colonization of Palestine, first by the British and then by Zionist settlers, gendered violence is embedded into colonial structures and relations. These violent processes have severed our connections to the land and have sought to erode the social fabric our societies were once built on. But since the earliest iterations of colonization and imperialism, Palestinian women have been at the heart of resistance, refusing to be severed from the land and struggling against colonial attempts to rewrite our social relations. During the course of the uprisings against British and Zionist colonialism in 1936, Palestinian women fundraised for the resistance, helped facilitate the escape attempts of political prisoners, and smuggled arms. Schoolgirls assisted in fundraising for the militias that took up arms to fight against British imperialism and the Zionist project. Palestinian women's role in the household, from the homeland to the camps to diaspora, often made them the heart of the tradition of samud, meaning steadfastness or rootedness. Despite immense hardships, in these homes live cultural practices that predate Zionist colonization and are deeply intertwined with the Palestinian identity. Palestinian culture and identity are often passed on to children through a motherhood that is committed to samud, a revolutionary motherhood that ensures that the young never forget the compass of Palestine and never cease the fight for liberation and return. Both in the home and on the battlefield, Palestinian women are integral to the anti-colonial struggle. This tradition of resistance is exemplified in the resistance of Dalal al-Mughrabi, who did not hesitate to take up arms and join the struggle for liberation, becoming a martyr on the battlefield at the age of 19. Her martyrdom exposed the brutality of the Zionist regime when a video of Zionist soldier Ehud Barak, who would later become prime minister, showed him desecrating her lifeless body. The martyrdom of Dalal highlights the relationship between colonial violence and gender-based violence and affirms the centrality of the anti-colonial struggle in the liberation of Palestinian women. This relationship has been emphasized by many revolutionary women in our struggle, although perhaps most clearly by Leila Khaled, who in 1969 became the first woman to hijack an airplane. In her autobiography, Leila tells the story of being in resistance training with other revolutionary women and hearing on the news of Amina Dahbour, Palestinian revolutionary who became the first woman to participate in a foreign operation. Leila says, quote, "Within a few minutes, we were all celebrating the liberation of Palestine and the liberation of women," end quote. For Leila, the liberation of women is bound up in the liberation of homeland, and the liberation of homeland cannot be achieved without revolutionary women engaged in struggle.
In the words of Palestinian communist revolutionary George Habash, quote, "Palestinian revolution provides the most suitable objective conditions for the process of women's liberation, which reflects the dialectical relationship between the Palestinian revolution and the liberation of Palestinian women," end quote. Habash states, quote, "The path leading to genuine liberation of Palestinian and Arab women is the path of participation in the national democratic revolution. Some women may achieve individual liberation to a certain degree. However, complete liberation cannot be separate from the ongoing battle between the forces of progress, liberation, and socialism on one hand, and the forces of imperialism, Zionism, and reaction on the other," end quote. Women's liberation is of necessity connected with political liberation, as the Zionist colonial and imperialist project serves as the ultimate patriarchal figure, seeking to control every facet of Palestinian life. The Zionist entity has categorized Palestinian motherhood as a threat, and thus transformed the bodies of pregnant women into a battlefield. It employs military checkpoints to prevent pregnant women from getting to medical appointments. Countless women have been forced to give birth at these checkpoints. This gender-based violence extends to political prisoners who are prohibited from receiving prenatal care and are forced to give birth while their limbs are shackled. In 1982, during the Sabra and Shatila massacre, pregnant women were targeted and their wombs stabbed by fascist soldiers in collaboration with this Zionist entity. These attacks on reproductive rights highlight both the relationship between colonialism and gender-based violence and the revolutionary nature of Palestinian motherhood. History has instilled in Palestinian mothers the painful understanding that their children are deemed demographic threats from the moment they are conceived until the moment they are put to rest. The sumud of Palestinian women is not only exemplified through their motherhood, but also in their resistance of Zionist incarceration, which overwhelmingly targets Palestinian men. Here we see wives, daughters, and mothers waiting for decades for the release of their loved ones, oftentimes raising entire families on their own in the process. Despite the economic hardships these women face, they never waver in their revolutionary love, rejecting the Zionist attempt to sever Palestinian familial relations. Incarceration is a central site of gender-based violence, both through its disruption of familial and social relations and the criminalization of resistance. Today, we honor Palestinian women incarcerated by the Zionist entity who refuse to yield in the face of brutality and who continue to fight to break the shackles of Zionism and imperialism. Women like Khalida Jarrar, Anhar al-Dik, and Isra Ja'abis, who have organized for liberation even within the cells of the occupier, teaching us the true meaning of camaraderie and highlighting the collective nature of our struggle. We affirm the generations of Palestinian women who have refused to separate gender liberation from national liberation and reject the continued attempts made by imperialist and Zionist feminism to treat Palestinian women as an individual and not as a collective. This bourgeoisie feminism, which has experienced a rise with the NGOization of the post-Oslo capitulation, is in direct opposition of the revolutionary anti-colonial struggle of Palestinian women, for whom gendered oppression cannot be removed from the material conditions of colonization and imperialism. We continue this tradition of revolutionary struggle for national liberation and envision a future where our people and all colonized people are free from the gendered violence of imperialism, capitalism, and imperialism. We uphold the generational commitment to sumud and resistance and maintain that our liberation will not be achieved without the full participation of women within the struggle. We reject the iteration of gendered liberation that do not address anti-imperialism and the national question. We salute revolutionary women across the world and honor colonized women and women in the global south who continue to be at the front lines of struggles for collective liberation. With love, solidarity, and a tenacious hunger for freedom, we salute Palestinian women today and every day, and we commit our lives to genuine liberation as one people and one struggle. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks to Palestinian Youth Movement for your very important work in Toronto and across Turtle Island. Our next speaker is the leader of the Communist Party of Canada, Liz Rowley, is the first woman to lead the party, and she is also a former public school trustee in East York and a veteran of many struggles for labor and democratic rights. Please welcome Liz Rowley.
Thank you very much, Comrade Chair. So dear sisters, brothers, comrades, and friends, I bring you warm and militant greetings of solidarity and struggle from the Communist Party of Canada on this International Women's Day 2022. This is the 111th anniversary of International Women's Day, proposed in 1910 by the German communist leader Clara Zetkin and adopted unanimously by the International Conference of Working Women meeting in Copenhagen. It was officially recognized by the United Nations in 1975 as a universal day recognizing the struggle internationally for women's equality. Well, its origins were in New York in 1908, when 15,000 women marched through the city, demanding shorter hours, better pay, and the right to vote. Well, some things don't change. 114 years later, and working women are still fighting for shorter hours, better pay, and the right to vote, to cast a vote that will count, and in the US at least, a vote that will be counted. I say working women because it is working class women who are struggling for economic and social equality. It certainly isn't Sherry Bridson of the Thompson family, whose personal wealth is an estimated $6.6 billion, or Heather Reisman, worth $2.93 billion, or Rita Bronfman, worth $2.1 billion, or Hillary Weston, famous for Loblaw's bread price fixing scam that cost families about $400 each over 14 years, including 2 years when she was Governor General in Ontario. These women know what class they belong to and which side they're on. They don't get maudlin about the unemployed, about women who make 30% less than their male colleagues, about families being evicted or people living in tenements or tents. They get rich and then they get richer because they can. Well, that's capitalism. These are the people who use offshore tax havens, who oppose increasing minimum wages and pensions, who fiercely oppose unions, pay and employment equity, and social spending on public services and universal social programs like healthcare and education, public pensions, childcare. They aggressively demand corporate tax cuts, bailouts, queues, wage subsidies, rent subsidies for landlords, and every kind of subsidy you can imagine. Canadians for Tax Fairness found 142 Canadian companies had made record profits of more than 100 million during the pandemic, including 50 who had made their highest profits ever, most of them paying below the statutory minimum corporate tax. Well, Toronto Dominion Bank is the richest corporation in Canada. Hydro One, which used to be a public utility before it was privatized, doubled its profits from 12% to 25%, paid no taxes, and ended up securing a tax rebate of $700 million. Corporations used the COVID pandemic to restructure their companies with mass layoffs and wage cuts resulting from part-time hours and precarious employment. They've cut their overhead by forcing people, especially women, to work at home with unrecognized and unpaid overtime, while also schooling their children and feeding and caring for family members. According to the January labor force survey, fully 1/4 of workers now work from home in Canada. Well, a bonanza for employers. They've forced employees to work in unsafe conditions, such as meatpacking plants, where many new immigrants work and became sick, some dying, or in food services or retail, where women are concentrated and where many became ill, suffered long layoffs and loss of incomes, or in the public sector, where nurses, teachers, bus drivers, and many others suffered from growing anti-government sentiments and indiscriminate anger fueled by the far right in Canada and the US, a movement with a political home in the People's Party of Canada and the right wing of the Tory party here, which led to the so-called Freedom Convoy, what a misnomer, of last month, and the occupation of Ottawa and some other cities across the country. Well, this is capitalism's answer to a deep and prolonged economic crisis, which arrived with the pandemic 24 months ago and is chewing up millions of working people, women, youth, racialized workers, immigrants, Indigenous people, and spitting them out as collateral damage in the worst economic crisis since 1929. And it's about to get much worse. Inflation, enormous increases in the price of food, fuel, and housing, combined with increase in interest rates, is pushing working people over the edge. Where a survey taken before the crisis hit showed that more than 50% of those surveyed were just $200 away from disaster at the end of every month. Today, that $200 lifeline has completely disappeared. A new level of desperation and fear has been reached, creating an opening for the far right to intervene and organize. The promised economic recovery has been exposed as a massive recovery for corporate profits, but not for jobs and incomes, not for the 1.34 million officially unemployed and precarious workers who saw 206,000 jobs disappear in January, all of them in the private sector, mostly affecting youth and women aged 25 to 54. So not a recovery for women who have been pushed out of the labor force in record numbers, not seen since for the last 30 years. And not a recovery for racialized and Indigenous peoples whose unemployment rates relative to the size of their communities is much higher, as is also the case for workers with disabilities. And not for the 620,000 employed workers who worked less than half their usual hours, joining the army of part-time or precarious workers across the country. And certainly not for the thousands of small businesses that went belly up, receiving little or none of the government largesse provided to big business, which makes up, by the way, the largest part of the government deficit today. Well, we are not all in this together, and we never have been. This has always been about increasing corporate profits at any cost, and the government's handling of the pandemic, the vaccines, and public health has shown that's the case. Well, Canada is one of the richest countries in the world. The federal government, with the support of all parties in Parliament, snatched up 6 times the number of vaccines needed to vaccinate the whole population, including raiding the COVAX account, the UN sanctioned supply set aside for poor countries to access. While the socialist countries produced and exported vaccines across the global south to save lives and to stop the development of variants that would inevitably wash over the whole world, Big Pharma exploited the situation by refusing to drop its patents, while 6 million people died, and the death toll continues to rise. COVID is not done with us, and it won't be until all the world's peoples are vaccinated against the virus and its variants. Now Canada has launched an undeclared war on Russia, sending troops, arms, equipment, and money, lethal aid that will not bring peace in Europe, but will fan the fires of an expanding war that might include nuclear weapons and could annihilate life on Earth. Well, I've brought you a lot of bad news today, and I'm sorry for that. And I haven't even mentioned the climate crisis and the urgency of action by the peoples of the world on this front as well. But in fact, that is the message, that the world's peoples must take action. They cannot sit back. That the world's women must take action. We cannot sit back while militarism and the drive to war and reaction rage around us. where social and equality rights of women, girls, Indigenous and racialized people, immigrants, religious minorities, nations, and peoples are threatened, where the security and livelihoods of working people are threatened. We must act. We must demonstrate and mobilize public opinion for peace. We must demand an independent Canadian foreign policy of peace and disarmament, withdrawal from NATO and NORAD, and stop Canada's purchase of warships and fighter planes. We must demand an end to Canada's involvement in US regime change operations and sanctions such as the illegal 60-year-old blockade of Cuba. We must fight for a political solution and an end to the war in Ukraine that started with the Russian invasion and is escalating daily with the involvement of NATO, the EU, US, Canada, and others. Peace in Europe hinges on all parties committing to a negotiated political solution. We must demand no less. We must demand that the Canadian government end its drive to war, end its export of arms and troops, and repatriate Canadian troops abroad now. We must demand an end to the whipped up war hysteria, war propaganda, and disinformation that is fueling Canada's drive to war in Europe and elsewhere in the world. Calling for Canada to disengage and de-escalate is not a green light to either side. It's a red light to global catastrophe. It's a demand for sanity, for survival, for our children, for our future. We must reject the prevailing mass culture of violence, militarism, and aggression, and to fight for a culture that values equality, democracy, peace, education, and science. Women must demand fundamental social and economic change, demilitarization and disarmament, solidarity and mutual security for all peoples, nations, and states. We need to curb the power of the big corporations, the police and military, and strengthen labor, civil, social, and democratic rights, and public ownership and democratic control. Women must fight for a future for themselves and their children, for their families and communities. Good jobs, full employment, climate justice, and a transition to publicly owned and controlled renewable energy. We have to fight for strong universal social programs and public services, for Medicare and public and post-secondary education, for universal quality public childcare. We need constitutional change that recognizes the rights of Indigenous nations, the Acadians, and the people of Quebec to self-determination, including the right to secession, and then fight like hell for a new, equal, and voluntary partnership that meets the needs of all. We need to demand the immediate implementation of the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the inquiry into murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. We demand an end to the 500-year-old and continuing genocide of Indigenous people in Canada by the Canadian state and by monopoly capitalism. Well, throughout the 20th century, women played a leading and often a decisive role in the struggles for peace and against war, for equality, democracy, and advancing the rights of women in Canada and the world. The Congress of Canadian Women, the WIDF, the Voice of Women for Peace, the WILPF, La Ligue des Femmes de Québec, Carol, LEAF, the Pay Equity Coalition, the Coalitions for Better Childcare, the LGBTQ organizations, as they were called at the time, the organizations representing Black and Indigenous women, immigrant women, organizations against violence against women, and many others played key roles in the history of women's struggles. Not least the movements for solidarity with the women and peoples in struggle for national and social liberation and for socialism around the world helped women fighting for equality in Canada as well as helping women fighting outside Canada. Today, we salute Palestinian women fighting Israeli apartheid, the Sudanese women fighting military dictatorship in Sudan, the women of Cuba fighting a 60-year-old US blockade and sanctions, women in Venezuela fighting US and Canadian regime change operations, women in war zones in Yemen, in Ukraine, and around the world. The big struggles for political rights, for legal rights, for the right to a job, to pay and employment equity, to pensions, to post-secondary education, the right to birth or abortion, to live free of violence, racism, and discrimination. All these were won by women who organized and fought to secure these gains. The National Action Committee on the Status of Women was a powerful political force in the country that worked closely with the Canadian Labour Congress and other progressive organizations to have a powerful impact on Canadian governments and politics. Scores of women's organizations, including the Communist Party, were affiliates made stronger for it, while also strengthening NAC itself. Canadian governments understood the significance of a strong, united, and organized women's movement aligned with labor, and they took decisive steps to destroy it as soon as they could. We also know the significance of a strong and united women's movement aligned with labor and the importance of rebuilding it now. While the form may be different, the goal is the same: to build a powerful, progressive, and countrywide women's movement closely aligned with the labor and people's movements to block the right and to win important advances for women, for democracy, for peace, and for social progress in Canada. Women across Canada can count on the Communist Party to fight for their interests and needs, for peace, and for fundamental social change in Canada. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Liz. You gave me goosebumps. Your militancy against capitalism, against imperialism, and your conviction in socialism, in the rule of the proletariat, is invigorating. Thank you for keeping the fire of resistance alive in us all. Friends and comrades, once again, I would love to welcome back our wonderful Faith Nolan. Faith, the stage is yours.
Hi, I can't seem to get my video up here. Hello?
Hi, Faith.
Hi.
Your video is not working?
No, the video is not. Oh,
It is
now.
working now.
This came, okay.
Your magic.
All right, thanks. Thank you. Thank you so much, Farah. And yeah, Liz, you know, whenever I hear you speak, I'm so inspired. I can't believe that you kind of bring it all together, you know, especially as a white woman. You know, I'm not used to hearing white women have that broad a spectrum, but it's so important to understand that, you know, the issue of peace and Canada's involvement. I think you talking about that's like so important that we understand that just as people on the planet, how we could all be blown up by this capitalist bullshit, you know, which is just about stealing land and money. Even the idea of borders, I think that's something we really have to start to look at, is the idea of borders and countries and ownership of land, these sort of geographic things. So I had, you know, I love women. I've always loved women. I want to give a big shout out to the, I guess, the members of the Black Women's Collective and people who are still doing this work around Camp Sis. Because they're definitely my loving sisters. And all of the dykes who are just like holding back that patriarchy. All right. So this is a song called Loving Women to all of you. What I wanna tell you when you say you like a show is, would you stand with me? I'm singing to be free. You see the color of my skin, I have ancestral chains. These scars of robbery even took my name. Yet I'm a loving, loving woman Woman, loving woman, gonna lock away, hold my hand, loving woman. Could we walk side by side and stand eye to eye? This is a land of greed, the land is not mine. And if you could tell me yes, I'll hold you in my arms, build a new horizon under the sun. I will be your loving, loving woman, a woman, loving woman. Could you hold my hand, loving woman? So many people are filled with hatred just because we live our lives trying to claim they own things that they do not is not right. Just like the country I am in, it's a colonialist spin. It is not mine. The land is not theirs or mine. We are a loving, loving woman. Woman, loving woman, and hold my hand, loving woman. And remember, el pueblo unido, hermano vencido, hold my hand, loving woman. One more time, okay? El pueblo unido, hermano vencido, hold my hand, loving woman. Because there ain't no power like the power of the people. No power like the power of the people. The power of the people can never be defeated. All right, let's carry it on. Just like our ancestors and the children of tomorrow. Carry it on. Carry it on. Till justice is done. Till we have peace and equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Faith. We must carry on, for sure. Thank you, everyone, for coming out today. Thanks to Kiran, Sonia, and Romy for the assistant with technology, and to all the wonderful women who helped put this event together and who participated in our event today. What the world needs now is a peace movement that demands world leaders move beyond securing gas and oil assets to amass corporate wealth and destroy our planet. We need world leaders who believe in the dignity of indigenous people, in working people, in Ukraine, in Russia, in Syria, in Venezuela, Palestine, and across the globe. This war has exposed the roots of capitalism, exploitation, racism, and oppression. Now is not the time to pick sides, send lethal weapons, or expand NATO. Now is the time to fight for peace. With these words, I also want to thank all our viewers today. I'm sure we will see each other at a protest, at a peace rally, at a solidarity event for world peace, for love, for humanity, for women, in solidarity. Thank you.
There's a protest today at 4 o'clock at Chrystia Freeland's office in Toronto, and I hope to see everybody there.
Yes. Thank you, Liz, for reminding.
In spirit.